Welcome back to Between Sundays, the podcast where Christians are trying to figure things out where most of life happens. I'm Bobby.
And I'm Justice.
And today we're continuing even further into really the last couple episodes we've talked about of service and living for God. We've kind of talked about both sides of the coin. I know one of the first episodes was talking about, serving too much, getting burnout, and that just being busy isn't necessarily being spiritually healthy. And then one of the last episodes we talked about not serving, not getting off the pew, not doing something. And so actually today, coming off of a graduation service that we just had for Carolina Bible College this past Sunday, and was a great service. We had Brother Jason Holly here preaching, and really a timely message. And so that's just kind of been on our heart, so we're going to kind of continue that today, not to necessarily preach his message today or his outline, but just to further in that today. So definitely looking forward to, I didn't realize this would kind of be a three-parter as we got into all this, but looking forward to getting into this today. So, but we got kids camp coming up. Mm-hmm. I think you're about to go to that. And all week long up there. What part? I always forget what part of North Carolina it is.
I have no idea.
You have no idea?
I didn't even know it was in North Carolina until now.
Just now? Yeah. It is. No, it's just in. It's not too far in.
I start driving the bus and then just
wherever the GPS says.
Follow the other one in front of me, and then we just end up there.
So kids camp here at Arch, of course, all the summer activities are kicking up right now. We've got kids camp this coming week, and how many normally take there? I think it's.
Oh, you caught me in the yawn. I think she said there's 75 going right now.
Okay, I know we're usually that close to. I think it's been close to 100 before. Mm-hmm. In different years and all that stuff. So
it's a good group.
It is a good group. It is a good group. I know in years past we've had some different churches come, things like that. But it is up there in nowhere. There is no signal, no nothing. It is your typical camp.
It's beautiful.
Church. It is a nice property up there. I've been several years, and of course helped to kind of on the media side. I've never done the counselor side like you have for kids camp.
It's a humbling experience. You stay in a cabin with a bunch of kids, and then it's your job to make sure that, of course, you're kind of in teams, so It's your job to make sure that your team's not behind on anything, or we're not showing up late to breakfast or lunch or anything like that. You gotta kind of. So I'll have a whole cabin, and Dylan's helping me this year, so.
Oh, is Dylan your helper this year?
Dylan's my helper, so we'll
could be good or bad.
I think it's gonna be good.
Yeah,
I think it's gonna be good.
Do you have your team color?
I think we're yellow, which is kind of. I don't want to say a junky color, but it's kind of like I don't have nothing yellow. Like last year, I was able just to kind of wear. I think I was red last year, so say like the hat. Like I went and bought the hat.
That works.
Like I had stuff like that already, but.
What color team won it last year?
I don't even remember.
I know usually one of the big competitive teams if Miss Kim's on there.
She's not going as a counselor this year.
I know, that's different. It's different. Normally she's pretty competitive.
Yeah, she's very competitive
when it comes to that stuff. So, but yeah, it's going to be a good week. I'm always excited to hear what happens up there. Again, beautiful place up there. Harvest Time Bible Camp up in North Carolina. And so just looking forward to hear the story. Both my boys are going, so I don't know if you'll have either one of them.
I don't know. She hasn't sent us who's in whose cabin yet, so we'll see.
Yeah.
As long as I have one of them.
You probably will. I think y'all had one of them last year, I think, didn't you?
Justice got mad at me a bunch because he'd be like, I'm trying to take a nap and you're waking me up. I'm like, yeah, dude, because there was a lot of kids I had to convince to go to sleep. I never had to convince him to go to sleep.
No, he'll go to sleep.
The first night, usually everybody's kind of up. Usually by the last night, people are skipping showers just to go to sleep.
Yeah.
So
I say that you don't have to convince them there. At home, I have to make him go to sleep.
Really?
Yeah, he goes to camp. He's like, yeah. I don't know what it is. If he could carry that mentality at home, he might not be as tired.
He makes his
but
bed. I mean, he doesn't leave any trash. I don't know
don't
what it
tell me
is at
that.
camp.
Don't, I just get mad. I'll just get mad if he doesn't do that at the house.
He ironed his own clothes while we was at camp. He was
Oh,
doing all
Lord.
did his
Yeah.
own laundry. He did everything.
He's
at
digging
camp.
a hole. He's digging a hole now. So. But yeah, summertime, man, is about to all kick up between that. And of course, July is going to be a fun month with everything that's going. Our VBS, I'm looking forward to this year with the kind of the Dude Perfect theme.
Yeah.
I say that until I realize how bad I am at probably making trick shots and everything.
As long as you don't sissy throw nothing, you just
No, I'm gonna
as
have to
you
just
can-
full send it. I mean,
Yeah.
if we can't halfway do this.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's in full swing, and they leave Sunday afternoon up there, come back on Friday, and then sleep all day Saturday. I'm sure when everything's done. So, but anyway, today getting into our episode, like I said, we this past week we had our graduation service for Carolina Bible College here at our church. If those of you maybe listening don't know, we have a Bible college that we've had for the last 8 years. Matter of fact, Justice being an alumni of CBC, and so every year we have, of course, a big graduation service. But for us, it's church. We just have a good time, and it's full worship. It's our choir and everything. It's not just your typical, kind of straightforward commencement service. And so we always are thankful for what God does. It's really one of the more favorite services of the year with different preachers that we've had come in. And this past year we had Brother Jason Hawley, pastors up at Haynes Baptist Church in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And of course, always does a great job anytime I've ever heard him preach. I know he was probably one of your favorite teachers in college. There's a lot of quotes on the podcast that have been said, I think, from Brother Jason in times past. But something that kind of challenged my heart and realized was kind of going in line with 2 of the episodes that we've done in the last 3 weeks. Again, talking about not being too busy and burning out by being too busy. But then last week talking about not serving,
not being busy enough.
Not being busy enough. And then he got into service, really a different message for a graduation service, but a much needed message for a graduation service. But he got into the example of Christ and washing feet. And really, I honestly wasn't expecting him to go there. I kind of didn't know where he was going to go with it. But very much needed for those guys.
Oh, yeah.
And so he got into, again, washing their feet. And so that's what we want to get into today, this example of service. So we've talked about, don't be too busy. We've talked about make sure you are busy, or you are doing things. I say that, not busy, but make sure you are serving. And then I think today's kind of really the kind of culmination of it of, okay, if I don't need to be too busy, but I do need to be serving, what does that look like? Where does it start in life? And so I'm going to get into, just read a few of the verses and then just kind of jump into it. But John chapter 13 is where he was coming out of for this graduation service. In verse 3, it says this: Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he was come from God and went to God, he riseth from supper, and laid aside his garments, and took a towel, and girded himself, and that he poureth water into a basin, and began to wash the disciples' feet, and to wipe them with the towel wherewith he was girded. And so throughout this service, throughout this message that Brother Jason was talking about, he was getting into what does service look like. And so, again, just kind of us talking today, not as many notes as usual with it, but just kind of talking from our heart of what service looks like, and hopefully challenge all of us that, what we think it may be to really what it is, and how we can, be effective for what God's called us to do.
Yeah, I think one of the best things that Christians really look at is, I'd say a lot of people that have grown up in church or grown up around church really know that to be the ultimate example of Christ is to be a servant. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of times, unfortunately, we lose sight of what a servant is. Everyone wants to be a servant, until someone treats us like one. And when we're treated as a servant, we're humbled, we're brought low, and really we have to figure out where our ego or where our pride stands.
Yeah.
And looking at this verse, Christ is really, it talks about the beginning of really knowing. He never one time questioned who he was.
Yeah.
He just knew what his purpose was. And I think a lot of times we think of ourselves and we know what our purpose is, or we know who we are, but we don't like to think of ourselves in that way.
Yeah.
And again, you look at what a successful Christian life looks like. It looks like a servant.
Yeah.
And I think everyone strives to be one, but not everyone likes to be treated as one.
Yeah.
And,
yeah. I mean, a lot of people, I think we've said this kind of before in different episodes. We love the idea of service, of God using us. But sometimes when it comes down to the realities of what that looks like, it's hard for us to accept that.
Yeah.
I was looking in the latter part, and this was kind of another section, and we'll get into it more, that he talked about. But in verse 13, he said, "Ye call me Master and Lord, and ye say, well, for so I am." And there's this acknowledgement that they followed him and trusted in him and called him Lord. He said, "If I then, your Lord and Master, have washed your feet, ye also ought to wash one another's feet." And this is really kind of where he honed in on that night. He said, "For I have given you an example that ye should do as I have done to you." Mm-hmm. And, again, so many people, they want, again, or I say it like this, they like the idea of serving God, but if we're not careful, rarely do we follow the example that Christ said of what service is. I mean, really, from day one of his ministry and what he did on this earth, you see more of him being a servant in a lot of ways than just having the stage and just preaching and all of this stuff. And that's one thing we've got to understand, that if Christ is who he was and said, "This is the example that I'm setting to you," He didn't get up in that moment and give them a grand speech or the next sermon or anything like that. And really, one of his, in those final moments of him being on earth, said, "Hey, look, this is what it's all about. This is what being serving God looks like, is being that servant to others." And again, it's that question of, if Christ was that example, if Christ did what he did in this moment, how much more, should we implement that or be an example of that in our lives?
Yeah. We want to be servants, but we want to be the manager of servants, I think, a lot of times.
Yeah.
And we want to be able to say, well, that's someone else's job, or that's someone else's responsibility. When in reality, the servant that Jesus was being was the job that was necessary, but would have been easy to say, that's not what I do. That's I'm too good for that.
Yeah.
And really, he's kind of taking away this persona that, anybody can truly do the job if they put ego aside or they put pride aside. And some of the best Christians I've ever met were some of the ones that did the smallest, seemingly most insignificant, dirty, not prestigious jobs, but they just did the job because they were a servant.
Yeah.
And, again, we think about what's going to make an impact in this life, and oftentimes, if we're honest, it's those little jobs. It's the jobs that show humility instead of showing how great I am.
Yeah.
Because Christ wasn't doing it because he had to or was being forced to. He did it because he wanted to be the example.
Yeah.
And I think being the example is carried on by us being the example for others.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it really poses this question of where is your worth coming from?
yeah,
Because if your worth is in Christ, if the value is in that, then we'll be willing to do whatever. But if we feel like the worth is in the position
yeah,
or the worth is in the title, like I'm not worth anything unless I have this, or I'm not worth anything unless I have that, we're always going to be chasing the position or the title.
yeah,
But if our worth is just at the fact that we have Jesus Christ and that is our life, then no matter what we do, I mean, one of the biggest things I taught to our my Bible class back when school year was going on in our ethics class, a lot of times I would reference, which she doesn't do it now, but I would reference Miss Martha. That was not Martha in the Bible, but Miss Martha here at our church, that cleaned our church for years.
mm-hmm.
And, this was a lady that just was humbled and honored at the fact of being able to do something for the Lord and do something in our church. And I remember it was, I guess, a few months after being here. And I remember walking into the sanctuary and I was going to get something up in the video booth or something like that. And the lights are on. I knew she was in there cleaning. And I go in there and the vacuum's not running. And she is literally on an altar just weeping and just praying for the church, praying for our pastor. I remember listening just for a few minutes. And you can't tell me that, God didn't use that, in our church. I mean, and that's the thing. When I pastored, I had a lady named Miss Gail that she just, would help in any way and all this stuff. And what I'm getting at through all of that is that their worth, their value was not in a position. It was not in a title. Because at the end of the day, the title would have been cleaning lady or custodian, But it was just this, I have God and I have a relationship with Him. My values in Him, just let me serve Him however I can.
Mm-hmm.
Let me be the one that pushes a vacuum or cleans the toilets or does this or that if it means it's for the glory of God. And I know that sounds like a counteractive thing of like, okay, cleaning the toilet and glory of God, but I mean it's just that idea of He's got something for me. Let me do what I can for Him. Let me be a servant. Let me do something that is not just for me but also for others. And again, that's the example that's being set here in this of Christ is saying, look, it ain't all about the big moments.
Yeah, I mean, your example of service is your example of service is your purpose of love, of saying, I'm choosing to love this person this much.
Yeah.
And that's what Christ was doing. He wasn't we do things as a servant to say, wow, look how humble I'm being.
Yeah.
We do things as a servant to say, wow, look, I'm this is my way of showing that I don't think I'm better than anybody.
Can you brag humbly?
Well, you can attempt to.
You can see, yeah.
and it I don't want to beat people up, but it sounds like a lot of our church of like, we as Christians do things to try to eliminate pride and never lift up love.
Yeah.
Where we have our mindset that Christ wasn't doing this to show how humble He was, or he wasn't washing these disciples' feet to show how much humility He had. He was washing their feet to show them how much love He had for them.
Yeah.
Of saying, my love for you will take me down to your feet to wash them. My love for you will take me to a cross. My love for you will raise me 3 days later. That's what being a servant is. It's not lowering yourself to, because this is what we do as a servant. You have the ability to do A, B, C. Well, I'm going to go a little bit, I'm going to compare myself to you. I'm going to go a little bit lower. I'm going to do something a little more humble than you.
Yeah.
And it's a skewed way of looking at being a servant. Your servanthood is based on how much you love somebody, not how low you take yourself down.
Yeah.
And when you really look at that, you think of a Miss Martha wasn't doing it because, you know, the job of the custodian is the lowest on the totem pole. She was doing the job of the custodian for the love of the people.
Yeah.
And we look at things of, you know, in ministry of, well, I'll go here and pick these people up, or I'll hold the door open for this person, or I'll tell this person about Jesus, when in reality it's like, are you doing this to show how humble you are? Are you doing this to show how much you love these people?
Yeah.
And whenever I look at it in the way of, I'm not doing this lowering myself. Christ wasn't washing the feet, lowering himself to any lower standard.
Yeah.
He was upholding the same amount of standard, just excelling his love.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think we miss that a lot of times. Of service isn't about how humble you can get. Service is about how much you can love somebody.
Yeah. Well, I think, too, we can have kind of a skewed view of what the word humble is.
Like because we know how we would treat a servant.
Yeah.
We know how we would treat somebody that's lower than us. We know how we would treat somebody that's in rags. And because we look at them of a low self-esteem or a lower position, we immediately assume that in order for me to become a servant, I have to be that person.
Yeah.
When that's not the case.
Yeah, I mean, when we look at the word, and you said it perfectly, we kind of take the word humble, add the word lowering to it, and then almost look at it like we're like this a demotion thing.
Yeah.
You know? But I mean, like you said, at the end of the day, being humbled or humbling ourselves or whatever it may be, however you word it, is not this like, oh, I'm just, you know, stepping down from something. You know, I'm going less than what I am. Like you said, Christ kept the same standard, because you look at it this way. The Scripture talks about that Christ humbled himself when he stepped off his throne to come to this earth to die on the cross for us. Mm-hmm. But that didn't take away anything of who he was.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like you said, we treat it like this. All right, everybody, look, I'm humbling myself. You know, I'm lowering myself, like it's this downgrade thing. No, it's not. It's just, like you said, my love for those people will say, hey, let me serve you in this way.
Yeah.
Let me do something for you that'll help you or be an example or show you the love of God in this. And like you said, I mean, if that was the case, Jesus Christ washing the disciples' feet would have taken him out of a position of dying on the cross for us, if it was about downgrading or anything like that. But he still was just as much God. He was still just as much the Savior, being on his knees and washing the feet of the disciples, than, you know, him standing on a mountaintop and preaching to the masses, you know. And again, it's that love for others that he had. Again, what he was getting to in this moment is, okay, I can tell you all day long how much I love you, or I can demonstrate how much I love you. I can show you the love that I have for you by this action right here, by this, you know, this choice that I'm making. And that's the thing that we've got to get. I believe a lot of Christians got to get to the place of, is kind of going back to the beginning of it. We talk a lot of service, and we talk a lot of love for God, and we talk a lot of the ideas of what Christianity is, but we've got to get busy demonstrating it. Yeah. We can tell somebody, I love you, all day long, but if there's never actions put towards it, then there's no evidence of that love. And that's what, you know, Christ is doing, you know, in this moment, is showing the depth of his love by his service, you know, to the disciples.
I think one of my favorite verses is James chapter 1, verse 1. And it starts off James. He's saying, who's writing the book? James, a servant of Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And we forget so many times, maybe this is going to sound weird. We forget so many times that we're not a servant to other people. We're a servant to Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And Jesus Christ was the ultimate example of saying, you being a servant to me is you showing love to other people.
Yeah.
Again, showing love to people that won't ever be able to pay you back.
Yeah.
Because love is an action. I can tell you, I love you. I can tell my wife I love her. But it's what are those actions that I'm doing to prove what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And your love for someone else is based off how is your faith making their life or their burdens lighter?
Yeah.
How are you being a servant of Christ and serving other people? And that's something that we don't like to do.
Yeah.
Because we don't like to think of someone else being higher than us. We don't like to think we have zero problem. We have zero problem holding the door open for someone we have no idea who they are. But sometimes it's hard to make that phone call or send that text message to someone who we do know who they are, but they've hurt us or they've treated us like a servant.
Yeah.
And Christ really says at the end of the day, what has to die is me thinking I'm somebody.
Yeah.
Me thinking I'm above doing this or I'm below doing this. When you're not a servant to man, but you're a servant to Christ. And being a servant to Christ says, listen, if you're going to follow me, you're going to have to do what I've commanded you to do.
Yeah.
And that is to put the Lord first. And the second, that's another one of my favorite verses. They've asked Christ for one thing. So what is the greatest commandment? He says, love the Lord with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. And I can almost see them inhaling to say something else.
But the second.
And he's like, but the second is likened to it.
Yeah.
And
like before you think you think you know what I'm gonna say next.
Yeah, but the second is likened to it, to love thy neighbor as thyself. And I've always found that verse so curious, to love thy neighbor as thyself, because no one will love you more than you love yourself.
Yeah.
You know what you want, and no one can love Justice more than Justice.
Yeah.
And no one can love Bobby more than Bobby. But that's the love we're supposed to have for each other. Mm-hmm. Whether we agree with that person, whether we don't agree with that person, whether that person is completely in left field or that person is straight down the line. What are you doing to show your servanthood as an action, not just a title?
Yeah.
Because we all want the title of servant, but nobody wants the duties of a servant.
Yeah. Well, and that's why, the other night when we were in that graduation service, Brother Jason was talking about, he's like, this isn't your typical, commencement service or, graduation sermon or anything like that. But I remember towards the end of that, you're talking about that pride and setting that aside. He started talking about the end. He said, he's like, you worked hard for it and all that, and that's great, but, I don't care about your diploma. I don't care about your position or your title or things like that. But what are you doing to serve God? And that's the thing we get into, is this place of what are people missing out on? What opportunities to serve God and to make an impact in people's lives are we missing out on because we think we're above a certain thing, or that's not in our area or anything like that, And I remember one time I was talking with somebody. I remember we were renovating the lodge.
Is this my water bottle?
Yes. We were renovating the team building. And I remember one day I was in, kind of my work clothes. I had my shorts on and T-shirt and, just kind of work pair of shoes and carrying some tools over there. And I was talking with somebody and they're like, "What you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm going over team building and I'm, going to, we're going to build I think we're building the stage that day in there when we were first renovating the lodge." And I don't think anything wrong necessarily meant by it, but it was just kind of this idea of like, well, but you're the youth pastor, all this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, but sometimes it means doing things that necessarily isn't what you thought you signed up for, or whatever it may be. And I know that's kind of a loose example of this, but it's just this idea of none of us are above doing any level of service for the Lord. If it means getting our hands dirty, if it means setting aside the pride or the position or the title of things, like you said earlier, if it's about our love for God first and it's about our service to God first, then we'll be willing to do what is necessary after that.
Yeah.
We won't get to the place of saying, well, that's not my gifting or that's not my calling or whatever it may be. Because, again, it's at the end of the day, it's loving God and loving others. Just like, again, like you was talking about, I want myself treated right. I treat myself right. I want myself treated right. If I care for myself in that way, then why would I care less for others if I'm supposed to do it the same way as I would myself?
Yeah.
And so, again, it's setting aside that pride, being willing to, and I know this is simple ways of looking at it, being willing to grab a vacuum or move some chairs or whatever. And I know that's, again, a simple way of looking at it, but where does it all stem from? Again, it is the worth, is the value in the position. If that's the case, we will be prideful.
Yeah.
We'll get to the place where we say, that's not what I'm meant to do. But if the worth is in God and just being honored at the fact that God would choose to use us and we want to serve Him and show our love for Him by serving others, then we're willing to do what's necessary in this life.
And service and service isn't always the funnest thing to do sometimes, because in that story he was really hitting home the points of Peter was in the group of people that he washed his feet.
Yeah.
And Thomas was in the group of people that he washed his feet. And Judas was in the group of people that washed his feet. And it's really looking at your life and saying, has the Lord blessed me with the ability to help this person? And if he has, help them. And that's what I think so cool about this story is Jesus knowing Peter's going to deny him, knowing Thomas is going to doubt him, knowing Judas is going to betray him. We have this, I think we all have this ability to see the snake in the weeds and write that person off. Yeah. And that's not what Jesus did. Even though he was, I'm sure a little leery of Judas, and even though Christ knew that Peter was going to deny him, and even though Thomas was going to wonder, it still amazes me that whenever Jesus says one of you are going to betray me, they all look around as to who is he talking about, because it is used a lot of times as Judas was doing such a good job of camouflaging himself. But the reality is Jesus was doing such a good job of treating them all the exact same way. Yeah. They had no idea who was going to be the one to betray him. And, we all have friends or people that we treat better. And I think that's human. I think that's a natural way. There's people that I'm going to favor or maybe go out of my way a little more often. I think that's the human side. I don't necessarily think it's the right side, but I think it's something that no matter who that person is, no matter how much you disagree with them, no matter what they did or are doing or going to do to you, how are you being a servant? I get on Facebook all the time, and you know, again, I'm not condoning letting bad doctrine or bad theology continue on whenever it's hurting people. But at the same time, you've got to remember that you're not God, and you're commanded still to love and care for people. And when we try to place our love with stipulations, or we try to place it, well, this person's going to hurt us, or this person is the enemy, and this person has done things in the past. It's like, well, so did Peter and Thomas and Judas, but Jesus still treated them all the exact same.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it convicts me the most of, is when Jesus says, tonight one of you are going to betray me. They look around, they wonder, because Jesus was the same across the board.
Yeah.
He didn't look down on them. He said, yeah, one of you guys is about to treat me like a servant.
Yeah.
You're going to make me put my money where my mouth is. But he did the ultimate example. And as much as Christ died on the cross for Peter, he died on the cross for Judas.
Yeah.
As much as he died on the cross for, the worst person or the best person, he did it all the same. And I think a lot of it has to come down to, again, we have a tier list of ourselves. One of the best sermon illustrations I've heard, and I've used it before, is giving a piece of paper to everyone. And I don't know why I'm telling you this, because I can't ever use this illustration again, because there's going to be smart people. But giving a piece of paper to everyone in the congregation and saying, write down the worst sinner you can ever think of. It could be throughout all history. And whenever I ask this question, I got some, can I write down Hitler, and can I write down this person and that? Like, write down whoever you think the worst sinner is.
Yeah.
And there wasn't a single person that wrote down themselves, because we all think of ourselves higher than what we should. We all esteem ourselves higher than we should. And, I think that really boils down to a servant has to really know who they are. They have to know whose they are, and they have to know who's watching. And we can't fully be a servant looking over our shoulders, wondering who's watching or doing too much for somebody, but really just being a servant for whoever Christ has put in your path and you have the ability to help.
Yeah.
There's been many a times at a gas station where a problem has come up or a situation has come up, and the Lord has given me the ability to help somebody.
Yeah.
But it's never because anything I've ever done. It's because Christ has ultimately given me the ability to serve somebody for him. So.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things of we almost reserve service to certain people.
Yeah.
It's like, well, that person didn't treat me right, so I'm not going to do that. But again, one of the greatest things throughout this verse that he kind of leaves them with is he says, if I then, your Lord and Master, have done this, he says you ought to do it. But then he says this, for I've given you an example. And I kind of wonder through this. Obviously, this is all just, speculation. Obviously, I haven't talked to these guys to see what their, mentality was after this. But it's almost like you wondered, maybe even if they didn't fully grasp what happened that day, but down the road, when somebody did them wrong. You know, like you're talking about the three that were in that crowd that day as he's washing them. And then later you wonder if Peter's like, well, this person did me wrong, but his mind goes back to, but you know what? I did wrong to Christ one time. And yet before that ever happened, he still did this for me.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, he's still leaving that example today. I remember back in 2006, 2007, when I was working through college and I was working at a car lot, I had a guy there named TJ. And TJ, good guy overall, but very much, he never said it, but I'm assuming, I don't know, I would say atheist at the time, maybe not. Maybe it was just heavy church hurt. I really don't know. But he was not about God. He was not about the church. Very adamant about it. I could have some good conversations with the guy as long as it didn't lead towards church things. And I remember times, you know, he'd say, hey, how was your weekend? And my default, I'd just go right into church. And he would either, you know, get upset by it. I remember, you know, he'd tell me how much he hated the church and all this stuff. And so obviously I'm in this place of, well, I need my bills paid. This is my job. I can't not be around this guy. You know, how do I still live this life around him? And really, as this is going, serve. How do I be that example of what God's called me to be? And I'm not saying it was easy days. I'm not saying that there wasn't days where I'm like, I would really just love to tell him what I'm thinking, you know, but still had to serve and live this life in a way that glorified God through it all. And I'll never forget, years later, I had graduated college and I was at my first church, serving as youth pastor there. And I got an email one day from him. And it was funny because I didn't have his email. I happened to be just kind of clearing out the junk box. You know what I'm saying? You do that every once in a while because it's stacked up. And I was clearing out the junk box and I saw his name. And he had emailed me. And he was telling me all through that email of how he had gotten saved. And, I mean, I hadn't heard from this guy in years. It's not like I was keeping up with him since then. And he tells me all through it and just how God brought him to this place and how he accepted Christ. And so I wrote him back and I said, TJ, I said, man, that's awesome. And I was just, you know, just thankful for what God had done in his life. And I asked him this question. I said, TJ, I said, I remember your comments. And I wasn't trying to be mean or, you know, air out dirty laundry or anything. I was like, I remember some of our conversations. I remember your view of things. I said, I want to ask you one question. What ultimately got you to the place to where you accepted Jesus Christ? I said, based off of how you felt and your view of things before that. And he told me this. He said, it was people like you. There was a guy there named Alonzo that sold Audis on the other end of where I was at. Very much a church-going guy. I love the Lord. He said, people like you and Alonzo and others that no matter what I said or anything like that, you just lived out your faith and lived out this life for the Lord. And he said, I started thinking about that, of how he had treated others, and yet people like Alonzo and others just stayed faithful and served God and lived for God. And I don't know, that just kind of hit me through talking through some of this, and even the night of Brother Jason preaching, of just, you know, we don't always have to say it all. We don't have to have it all figured out and all the words to say. But man, what an example and what an impact just living out this life, being a servant of God, can do in the life of somebody else. And again, my pride and my ego at times, and some of those conversations with him and remarks he would say, didn't want to be kind to that guy, didn't want to love him. But at the same time, it was this idea or this reminder that, but you know what? I didn't die for him, Jesus did. Mm-hmm. And he's just as deserving of knowing who God is as I was when I got saved. Yeah. And so you're right, it isn't always the prettiest of moments. It isn't always the glam job at times, but it's what God's called us to do if we're going to make an impact in people's lives. Yeah. And so, you know, again, it's just one of those things of what are we chasing? As we kind of kind of wrap it up and kind of get through the end of this. And again, what is our goal through all this? One of the things that he says at the end, he says, "Do this as an example." He's saying, don't just talk about it, but do it. Don't just bring this up as a story that you tell to somebody else. I've kind of talked about that before of in the church is like, it's real easy for us to talk about missions or how great it is for somebody else to go serve, but then we just sit and do nothing. Mm-hmm. And that's what he's getting into here. He said, look, don't just talk about how good of an example I was. I'm doing this as an example to show you what to do down the road, to how to live this life. He says, I've given you this example. And so this ain't about applauding Christ. This ain't about, just admiring him and just who he was as a servant. It's about following his example. And so, this week as you're listening to this, as maybe this is getting your week started for some of y'all, who is somebody that you can serve? And like we've talked about today, that maybe isn't your friend, maybe isn't the person that you default to. But here's the thing. Our love is not reserved for who we want it to be reserved for. It's for anybody and everybody. The love that God has for us, or the love that God has for people, is not just reserved for only a few. It's for everybody. And so, who can we serve this week? Again, as Brother Jason was talking, it isn't about our diploma. It isn't about our status. It isn't about our position. It's just about serving God. Mm-hmm. And I love that poem that he read at the end of just talking about this one life that we have, and what are we using it for? What is it counting for in this life? And that's again, I guess, kind of bringing these few episodes to a close of this topic. But obviously, don't be busy and miss out. I think that's one thing, going back to the first episode we talked about of this idea, is we can almost be too busy and overlook people. We can be so busy just doing medial things that we overlook others and serving mm-hmm. others. And then, like we talked about last week, we can not be busy enough and miss out on our service. But I think Jesus gave that perfect example of it, of just serving others, no matter if they're your friends or not, no matter of how they're going to treat you. At the end of the day, it's not. I remember. I know I say we're wrapping up, but I'll tell you what my Bible teacher said years ago. He was talking about salvation. He was talking about God's love and this gift that God's given us. And he said, though God in his sovereignty, may know who might not choose, who will choose him or not. He said, we don't know. Mm-hmm. He said, so if I don't know, I'm just called to love everybody. Yeah. And I'm just called to serve everybody and just get that message out there to whoever will receive it.
Yep. That's well, we have the house across the street. I was thinking about this the other day. Our house across the street's for sale. And thinking about what we're talking about today is something that whenever I'm called to love my neighbor as myself, not even my literal neighbor, but I have no choice of who moves into that house. Yeah, it's just the closest person to me. Whenever somebody looks at your life, is it say, wow, it was just whoever was, anytime I was around him, or anytime I was around her, or, anytime anybody was around them, you have no choice of who moves in beside you, but you do have the choice to love. Yeah. And no matter who they are, what they look like, what they do, what they don't do, you have the choice to love. Yeah. And, again, spread the gospel, use words when necessary. Absolutely. Is somebody going to bust hell wide open one day because you treated them terribly? Wow. So.
I think that's a good way to end it. Again, we don't make that choice, or we don't choose who's around us. We just live this life, and anybody and everybody we may come in contact with, But like you said, how do we choose to love them? So, guys, we appreciate y'all, and again, hope this is a little challenge, kind of with all of these 3 episodes put together. Obviously, don't be so busy that you miss out on what it's all about, but get busy, serve God. Obviously, we talked about last week. Don't just sit in the pew, but if you do, let this be the example. It ain't about our pride or our position. It's about loving others and doing what we can to show God's love to them. And so, guys, we appreciate y'all. Find somebody this week that you can be a servant to, that you can help, that you can show God's love to. And like he said, use words if necessary. Sometimes it's just about our actions, how we live this life. So, guys, we appreciate you. We'll see you on the next episode.
Appreciate y'all.